Abdullah Al Arian is an assistant professor at Georgetown University right here in Doha. He's joining us on the studio. Abdullah, you heard our reporter, Jane Ferguson, there saying that there were smaller protests, smaller demonstrations in different parts of Cairo as well as different parts of the country. What is that? Is that a different strategy that the protesters are using now?
Well, I think they're trying as much as possible to still continue to express their opposition to everything that's been happening in Egypt. And so what they're doing is they're dispersing different protests throughout the country and making it more difficult then for the army to intervene violently the way it has in the past. I think if they focus on smaller areas and in areas in which not tens of thousands of people are gathered the way that we saw in Rabaa initially, that this perhaps will try to at least stem some of the violence that we've seen. But of course the military has set a very dangerous precedent given the indiscriminate use of force that it's employed so far.
And do you get the sense that these protesters are, just break it down for us, are they pro-Morsi, are they anti-Sisi?
I think this goes far beyond Morsi at this point. I think this is really about Egypt being at the precipice of a possibility of a return to the old regime. If this counter-revolution prevails, we're going to see the culture and climate of fear that was predominant under the Mubarak regime return. We're going to see a return of the old political order, complete with the National Democratic Party, complete with all of the remnants of the Mubarak regime, complete with the repression of all opposition and independent political forces in Egypt, led by the Muslim Brotherhood, but this will extend to all groups within Egypt, and I think that's what these protests are about right now.
Can the supporters, the Morsi supporters, keep up the pressure, though, despite many of the members now arrested, Morsi himself detained, and of course, let's not forget Mubarak's release into house arrest yesterday?
Certainly, this is in the same way that we heard about January 2011 being a leaderless revolution. We are now seeing a leaderless opposition. This is not a heavily or highly coordinated protest movement. This is simply families who've lost loved ones, people who are outraged at the possibility that we can see a return of the Mubarak regime, even without Mubarak, who we know, of course, his release being symbolic and not actual that he would return to the presidency, but certainly we're seeing a return of the culture and the climate that the Mubarak regime instituted across Egypt.
Politically, where does Egypt go from here? Because the interim government is still going ahead with the roadmap that's been announced. How do you see this playing out?
Well, we've seen the intended reforms to the constitution, and those I don't think augur well for the Egyptian people. We're seeing certainly an opening for the return of old political forces, the corrupt political parties of old, to actually resume their place at the head of Egypt's political culture and political climate. And I think that this certainly, in addition to the emergency laws, in addition to the excessive use of violence and force by the Egyptian government at this stage, means that Egypt is really returning back to its old political ways, but in perhaps a far more dangerous way, given the fact that they're doing this supposedly on the back of a popular protest going back to June 30th.